According to the EPA, transportation accounts for more than 26% of greenhouse gas emissions, and 90% of the fuels used in transport are petroleum-based. Transportation is the second largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, which accelerates the very severe effects of climate change all around the globe. Of these emissions caused by transportation, light-duty vehicles account for 61% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. These are the cars that we drive every day. While the EPA sets strict fuel economy standards for our vehicles, there are still 8,887 grams of CO2 released into the atmosphere per gallon of gasoline that we use. Yet, Americans still value the convenience of their own vehicle. We still drive to work, to the store, even to cities and national parks. Even in New York City, the United States' least auto-dependent metro area, 56.9% of the population commutes to work by automobile. In a 2013 study, 85.8% of Americans revealed that they travel to work by automobile, and only 5.2% by public transportation. So how can we change this? To combat excessive greenhouse gas emissions, cities have taken extensive steps to increase their availability of public transportation for the daily commuter. According to the American Public Transportation Association, one person with a 20-mile round-trip commute who switches from driving to public transit can reduce his or her daily carbon emissions by 20 pounds, or more than 4,800 pounds in 1 year. After heavy trucks, aircraft emit the next largest amount of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. On average, 1 air mile is equal to 52 pounds of CO2 emissions, and over 102,000 flights depart around the world daily. In 2015 alone, 781 million tons of carbon dioxide were released into the atmosphere because of aircraft travel. To put that in perspective, the average American is responsible for 19.8 tons per person. While planes are becoming more and more efficient every year with new technology, it's up to the consumer to decide exactly how big they want their carbon footprint to be in relation to travel. There are a few key steps that we can take as consumers to mediate our effect on the planet via transportation carbon emissions. Biking is the least carbon-intensive way of getting from A to B. Portland, Oregon received the #1 ranking for biking in 2015 from the League for American Bicyclists, yet only 7% of the population there bikes to work. Even though cities are constantly investing in infrastructure like bike paths and trails, the United States is still very behind in relation to other countries. 40% of Germans and Swedes bike to work at least 1 day a week. To catch up, we need to go beyond investing in cycling infrastructure and invest in culture. By building a model similar to that of Copenhagen or Amsterdam, American cities can reshape the typical commute. For some people, maybe that means biking to a commuter rail in a city suburb, or even biking the full trip once or twice a week. To make this a little easier, over 119 cities in the United States have bike share programs with over 4,700 stations nationwide. Not only does this encourage the bike commute, but it shows those who pass by just how easy and fun it can be to bike in an urban setting, normalizing this previously rare infrastructure in America. These programs, and those like it, prove that America can build a more bike-friendly culture. It's up to us to decide, how should we get from A to B? We should also be asking ourselves why we constantly need to be places that we are not living. Why do we do this? How does transportation affect our relationship with the world around us and with nature. In 2016, over 330 million people visited the 59 U.S. national parks. Besides the intensive travel taken to arrive at these locations, many parks encourage driving around to see the most in a short amount of time. The Smokies and the Everglades, they have specific routes for tourists to drive, some even 3 hours long at a very slow pace. Is this the most sustainable way to get in touch with the natural world? Is this the immersive and wild experience that people desire? According to an NPR article, we are actually spending less time in nature. Since the 80s, the number of fishing and hunting licenses, even hiking and camping permits, has gone down about 1% steadily each year. So where are we spending all of our time? Arguably, a lot of this time is spent on our commutes. The average American spends 26 minutes one way on a commute to work each day. There are 90-minute one-way workers, 3.6 million of them in the United States. They spend an enormous chunk of their time going to and from work, all the while increasing their carbon footprints. Beyond the waste of time, there are many negative health effects associated with the longer commuter. They're more likely to have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and be obese. They're also less likely to vote and less likely to escape poverty. Our transportation and urban structure has demanded too much from the average commuter. Beyond carbon emissions, commuting affects our livelihood and paths to success. To be a healthier, more engaged, and more sustainable American, we need to commit to being more mindful of how we get around. In many situations, biking is not the answer. Purchasing carbon credits, taking public transportation, even cutting back on flights are not impossible solutions. To improve our relationship with the natural world, what gives us life, we have to give back in this one small way.